Human beings are searching for the personal experience of reality. They are seeking to come to understand themselves, to find a reason for their own existence.
And so you go round and round and round, ever chasing the illusion that there is something outside yourself, outside your here and now, to be attained that will make things better.
No guru, no method, no teacher, and no nothing else either.
Welcome, everybody. We have Rosemary Barria with us here today. Rosemary, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you today?
I am doing okay, getting over a bit of a cold. Right out of the gate, I like to ask people, what are they grateful for? So what are you grateful for today?
What always comes to mind is my family. So I did not grow up in the best circumstances. So for me to have this beautiful, stable, nice family is just a miracle to me. And every day I'm so grateful for my little family. So
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I definitely think that gratitude for stuff like that speaks volumes about somebody's character. And almost anybody that I've interviewed on this show, almost anybody that I've talked to that has spiritual gifts or stuff like that, doesn't typically come from the best circumstances. So it's interesting to see the connecting thread and all of that. What quotes do you feel most moved by?
This Marie Oliver poem comes to mind. Mary Oliver, I'm nervous though. Mary Oliver, Wild Geese. So the beginning of it is, I won't say the whole thing, but she says, you do not have to be good. You do not have to call on hands and knees. You do not have to. It's about deserving. And, as a recovering perfectionist, I really think that, having that in my mind that I can just exist in the world and not have to be anything and just be. So that poem actually really, helps me out a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfectionism is such an insidious mindset to get into. When I went shopping earlier, and I was just kind of thinking about that as I was walking around, like how much some of our belief structures that we deal with now were kind of instilled in us when we were little. And like, even for me, just buying something as simple as clothes, there is a sense of like guilt and shame and remorse and like some worry associated with it. I'm like, dude, there's nothing wrong here. But I was like, well, did I make the right choice? And it's like, dude, they're clothes. It's like $20. If it doesn't work out and you can't return it, it's not the end of the world. But I'm like catastrophizing.
I understand. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do before we get into some of these other questions?
Sure. So I'm an intuitive mentor is what I'm calling myself at the moment. So basically I work with people one-on-one and in groups to help them tap into their intuition, and then move forward with their life from a space of spiritual freedom, from empowerment, things like that. So I typically work with perfectionists, with heart-centered idealists, big dreamers that feel stuck. And so that's kind of my specialty, working with myself from like 5 years ago. So yeah, just working with that kind of really awesome, curious person that just needs a little bit of a nudge and almost like permission to do their own thing, So yeah, I use Reiki, tarot, all sorts of different tools. I am a coach, certified coach and all that, but yeah, Reiki, tarot, yoga. I'm a yoga teacher as well. So I combine them all into my own little system and work with people in super customized ways.
Oh, that's awesome. It's interesting too. One of the things that I found from just talking with people in this capacity is a lot of people want to guide people through their similar experiences. And I think that that's incredibly powerful. Like for me, my background is mental health and addiction issues. So for me, being able to kind of show that first off, you can come back from like being out of your mind. And then secondly, you can develop a whole different way of living. And then for me, tarot, I'm learning Reiki and all these other modalities and incorporating that into like a healing thing and a way to get comfortable in yourself. It's really cool, like to see the similarities, but also the nuances of difference based upon our personalities. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for that. Did you feel like you were different as others as a kid?
Very much so. I was a really weird kid. I was just always very serious. Like if you think about Lisa Simpson, that was me as a child.
Oh no.
I was an activist from a young age. I was picking up litter. Like I always had these gigantic dreams. I thought you had to do humongous things to change the world. And so that's where my perfectionism came in. Like I was always so concerned about making a difference, making sure I was doing enough, which actually froze me, you know? So yeah, even as a kid, I was concerned about these things. And so, yeah, I was a little bit, I'm sure I was annoying. I'm sure like I was really serious and everything was a big deal. Play was hard for me at times, you know, that might be for several reasons, but yeah, I felt very odd. I had friends somehow, but yeah, I was just a really weird kid. And so, yeah, I did feel different. And I felt different for a lot of my life until I found this kind of work, you know, just a few years ago. Like I finally feel like I found my home. Yeah, I was always a really spiritual kid too. But that was funneled in different ways, but yeah.
It's interesting how you identified being weird, but then when you do what traditionally people would call weird, you found more comfort in that. It's interesting.
Point, isn't it? Yeah, I finally found my home. Yeah.
I can relate to that for sure.
A lot of us can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting too, doing this, just talking to people, how many people really did feel odd as a kid. Very few people are like, yeah, I felt like I was like everybody else. It comes up, but not that often.
I bet not.
When was like the first time you ever noticed that you were a little bit different?
Really young, a young age. My intuitive skills though, like what I do now, that wasn't until, you know, my 20s, probably. I've had addiction problems too, so there was a lot of numbing there. But I did notice I was weird when I was younger. Like the idealism I had was far beyond anyone around me. 8 years old is when I started. I think I became an activist at 8 years old, probably. And then with the spiritual gifts and intuition, that started in my 20s. Honestly, that's when I really started noticing those things. But looking back, it was always there. It was just like I numbed myself so much that I wasn't in touch with it. I'm sure you can understand that. That
was actually going to be my next question. Do you think it was there, but then you turned to substances because you didn't know how to kind of navigate those gifts?
Absolutely. And I think that's really common in the healing community. A lot of us have had addiction problems because we feel so much and it's overwhelming, and anxiety and all those things are really common in our community. And yeah, so I really numbed out a lot out of desperation, probably, you know.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. A lot of people talk about being empaths now, and I definitely think that there are a lot of empathic people, but it's also incredibly destructive to be an empath if you don't have the tools to kind of navigate other people's emotions and I don't want to say disconnect from them, but understand where your emotions start and theirs ends, to like have that separation of emotions. And I think that that's one of the reasons why a lot of people with gifts turn to substances, is to shut that down, but they don't realize that they're completely shutting themselves down too. I know that that was my case, not knowing how to navigate intense emotional circumstances. And it's interesting because one of the things that would make us well-rounded individuals culturally and would probably reduce crime rates and all sorts of stuff would be classes in emotional intelligence and how to actually process emotions like well-adjusted civil people. But then I also realize that that kind of falls into that idealist trap where that would require the people to actually have emotional intelligence to try to instill that.
Right. Such a rare thing. Yeah, we don't, it's not taught. And I think, yeah, I had that where people would like constantly be coming up to me, even though I was very shy. Like I would go anywhere and people would be attracted to me, and I would be feeling all this stuff, and it was just a lot. So I think, you know, and then all the other things, I think substance abuse comes from a lot of places, but that is, looking back, that's the main thing. I just felt overwhelmed. And yeah, and I think that, you know, as a woman, that I have a more of an opportunity to delve into my emotional intelligence. So that's like a privilege I have as a woman. But um, more and more we're being like taught to be stronger, and like, you know, the world is overwhelming right now. You live in the United States. It's like ridiculous right now. So yeah, it's we those skills are not taught as much. I'm trying to find a school for my son where it is taught in some
Mhm.
capacity, you know. It's hard to find though.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It doesn't fit the curriculum or any of the stuff that they're trying to shove down your throat. It goes
No.
back to a quote by, I want to say it was Henry Ford. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. And having emotional intelligence isn't really a good skill for a worker because they won't tolerate a lot of bullshit.
Torture. I hated. I just quit my job 3 months ago, and I hated sitting there, like just working with like without it being able to use my emotional skills and my intuitive skills. It was just torture. Yeah, and then school is like training us to be workers, you know.
Yeah, it makes turns you into a cog. I mean, for me, I worked in the culinary arts field for 15 years, from like 15 till about 30. And all that is like emotional toxicity and ego and like all these things that now I'm trying to soften the edges of. It's just interesting to see where life ebb and flows too, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, this is kind of a fun question to add some levity to everything. If you could have a superpower, or if you have superpowers, what would they be, or what are they? Or you can do both if you want.
Levity is not my specialty. But yeah, thinking about this question, I immediately thought of time travel. And I
Very
thought that
cool.
would be a really cool tool to add to your like healing. Like you could actually go back and bring someone back to a place in their life and like work through that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just was thinking about that, and then how I would go back and just like see myself in these moments and just kind of, yeah, I think that'd be cool.
One of the things that came up when you said time travel was that Cher song, Turn Back Time. I don't know why.
For
Sorry.
levity reasons, that's why.
Right.
Yeah, if we could though, I don't know. Yeah.
No, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I would love that. I think there's so much like guilt in what our past selves, especially if we've suffered with like addiction and overcome it. It's like the old self, we want to like shame them and like don't want to bring them out to the surface. So telling your story is really amazing. And I saw that you, when you told your story, it was really inspiring to hear that. And so yeah, going back into time and just like observing and not necessarily trying to fix it, but just like seeing, oh, this is why I did this. And so yeah, I would love to read minds. I guess tarot kind of does that. But yeah, time travel.
What superpower do you feel like you do have?
Um, I do. I'm really good at like empowering people and
Mm.
like helping them get to like their truth. You know, when I use cards and pick up energy, I am using pretty deep intuitive skills. So I don't consider myself a psychic, but I'm really good at telling people what they need to hear at the time, and helping them move forward in life. I do think I'm good at that.
I think that's interesting too, because one of the things that I found about people that maybe have histories with addictive issues or like empathic skills, they're incredibly good at reading people, most likely because of how chaotic their childhood was, and like understanding people's emotions and understanding motives behind actions, and then also applying that same early understanding of situations to other occurrences in their life, so they can say if this then that, and apply it on like a wide variety of topics. And I
Yeah.
think that's incredibly useful. And it's funny because I think a lot of people that have gifts almost take that stuff for granted in some way. Like I didn't realize some of the stuff that I was doing other people weren't doing. Like,
Yeah.
and
I
when
think
I found out, no, you can go ahead.
no, I'm saying that's such a good point. I think that for me too. And so yeah, I think that's we take it for granted, these skills, you know. And I also think, you know, as people who have been through things, I don't know, I have a past of like some abuse and things like that, so I've had to get good at reading people to survive, you know. And but that's actually a huge skill, and so I'm grateful in a weird way for that. And so yeah, I agree completely with you. Like yeah, not everyone can do that. Like,
Absolutely. Learning to repurpose your trauma, like emotionally upcycling. I have an episode called Emotional Upcycling, and it really is like taking these negative things and turning it into a higher quality product that you can use to move forward in life.
I really love that. That's, yeah, I'm gonna go watch. That's really cool. Probably share that with some people. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool concept. That's really what all of us have to do. It's just putting a catchy term on it.
Yeah, well, that works. I think we need those catchy terms so people understand what we're talking about sometimes, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. This is kind of a heavier question now that we've had some levity in there. What circumstances do you feel shaped your life? I feel like you've touched on some of it, but
Yeah, I've touched on some of it. Yeah, I, gosh, so many things, but I grew up in a single parent household, the oldest of four. So that's probably another reason I'm so serious. Like I had like play is hard for me. You know, the right people get to see it, but yeah. So my father was an addict. I didn't get to know him very much. He was in and out of my life, things like that. So I had to grow up to be very maternal, very much the one that took care of everyone, very much with my stuff together, and so then you know, but I was, like I said, I was always like really idealistic. So I wanted more. I wanted to like escape that kind of life. And so, yeah, I've done all sorts of really adventurous things trying to escape my past. And, you know, I went to art school. I have a public health degree. I was like always searching and searching for something. And then finally, like, I've only been doing this work for maybe 3 years at the most. And my son was born super early. And so I decided that he like opened something in me where, you know, I decided that I would just live my most authentic self instead of like trying to fit myself into a mold. And then I found my home in that. And so, yeah, growing up the way I did, I was always trying to avoid family, trying to like not have a family, not, but that's the very thing that brought me home to myself is having a family, you know, and having my son. And so, yeah, despite how I grew up, like I have this really beautiful family, like I said, and that was like the pathway for me. I had to like do all these things to escape myself, and then I finally found myself in the simplest form, you know, just like having a family, becoming a mother, and yeah, there's so much to my story. Like I wasn't, yeah, so I don't know where to go. There's like so much to all of our stories, right? It's like what to focus on. But I think the thread in there is like my family life kind of being chaotic and then coming back to myself through that in a way.
mm-hmm.
Reshaping it, upcycling it.
Yeah, it's interesting how the things in our life that are oftentimes the most uncomfortable or displeasant or prickly are also the things that hold like the solution. For me, I never thought I would stop getting high or like partying because that's how I lived with life forever. And I never thought I would be back in the circumstances where I would have to reevaluate it at a certain point. And the solution to changing my life was so simple, but I made it so difficult by not wanting to do the one simple thing. And I think so many people miss out on that because they have some fear or preconceived notion about what changing their life is, and they miss the opportunity to make these small individual choices that mount up into something big and meaningful in the long run.
It's not that complicated, really. Like my story has so many complex points to it, but the simplest thing was just like, you know, I think I'm healing my lineage by having a family that's actually a decent family, you know, and then I'm healing myself by having like a home, you know, like a home in myself. And with that, and it's just like really simple. It's not that complicated, you know?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest issues is that we as a species overcomplicate the shit out of everything.
Sure do. Yeah.
The guy who's the mentor in the 12-step, my mentor in the 12-step program I'm in, actually he's my sponsor. He tells me that people can't be too stupid to really get things in line in regards to a 12-step program, but it's applicable to life in general. But they can definitely be too smart, and they can overthink stuff to the point where they screw themselves out of really good opportunities. And that's like 9/10 of my story is not being able to shut off my mind.
Right. I get it. Believe me. I understand. Yeah.
This is kind of a heavier question. What positive lessons did you learn from negative experiences?
Um, hmm. So there's two things. Like my son was born really early, like 3 months early. Um, he was completely unplanned. I was in a stable relationship. We were fine with it, but um, and I was before that. I've always been like super busy. I was like in my second degree, like I was getting my second degree in public health, and so I just kept going. And then he showed up 3 months early, and he was not like that's all I had to focus on. Like that's it. And then when he came home, all I could literally focus on was him and his like survival and my like survival. That's all I had. Everything got stripped away. And so all the things, I'm really busy. I like to like do a lot of things. All those got stripped away and I had to focus completely on myself and him. And so before this point, I had always been searching for my life purpose. And so when I say he opened up a portal, it's because he stripped everything away. And so all this, I'm like, what is actually my life purpose? Okay, you know, I went to really good art school. I went to get this public health degree. I did this and this, traveled to these places. I never felt fulfilled. When everything got stripped away and I had to focus on myself, then clarity. Then I was like, oh, this thing I've been doing my whole life, like the spiritual path, is my purpose. And that's, you know, it was so clear. The thing I had to do was get everything else out of the way and just keep, like you said, simplify, get it right down to the core of the issue. And so, yeah, that's pretty much what I teach now, like simplifying, taking care of yourself first, and then not focusing on the outside so much, focusing on the inside. So simple, but I had a hard time with that until literally a few years ago. So,
Yeah, I think most people do. And that's another very interesting point that you made, because it's a unifying thread in almost every conversation I've had with anybody on here is some external circumstance that completely changes somebody's whole worldview and kind of narrows their focus to like one small area, or they have one big obstacle to overcome, is usually a catalyst for immense change and getting their life on track. And it really is that emotional upcycling where at some point it's a choice of how people are going to let these circumstances define them, because one person can say this circumstance ruined my life and the other person can say this changed my life for the better. And it really is just a matter of attitude, I guess, and the actions and choices that people make. So I commend you for that.
yeah, and I've definitely had people I've worked with before I see that shift and then some. And I'm not all for like positivity, love, and light everything, because I do think that our shadow and negative experiences do need to be like addressed and looked at.
Agreed.
But yeah, eventually you have to let it transform you. Otherwise, you're just like wallowing in it. And I've definitely had a few people I worked with. I'm like, we're not going to work well together because some of that like fighter self has to come through, you know, that warrior self, you know, and that like openness and curious self has to come through. So,
It's an interesting balance, because if you're too negative, you can't really grow beyond a certain point. But if you're too positive, you're also kind of delusional. And from being somebody who's had clinical psychosis and like clinical mania and clinical depression at one point, like I understand those to an extent that some people don't. And it's like at some stages, positivity is like low level mania, and it's completely disassociated from reality just as much as being completely negative is. So like finding that, I don't even want to say balance, but fluctuating between a more centralized point so you never go too far to either extreme is difficult, but there's so much beauty in it, I guess. Although it's uncomfortable because most of us aren't used to it.
it's very uncomfortable. That's why I think it takes a lot of courage to do that kind of work. And that's really the kind of people I work with. That's another thing I'm grateful for, is those kind of people come my way. Just like really curious, open people, open to those kind of fluctuations and being uncomfortable. I was very uncomfortable when my son was born early and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, because before he was born, I was applying for grad schools. I literally thought I was going to like take care of him, go to grad school. Like that's how, you know, like perfectionist I was. I was just like, I could do all these things. And, you know, I was capable of a lot, but he stripped that all away, you know? So I'm super grateful, you know, I'm glad that I didn't have to go to grad school yet anyway. Yeah.
It's incredibly interesting too. One of the things that I found is by sharing about my experience, and they talk about this in 12-step programs, but it's applicable again to everything.
Mhm.
Um, I get so much more out of helping people through circumstances similar to mine. And like I learn new things about my own journey by helping people. And I'm sure that you can relate to that with what you're doing as well.
Yeah, it's like a mirror sometimes when people come and talk to me. Like that I relate so much to their stories, and then I work with really smart people too, so they teach me constantly, like um, by working with them. So yeah, I do think the teacher, student, mentor, client is very much a feedback. It's not. I really try to make it a goal to destroy that hierarchy. Like, but yeah, there's a place I've been that I can teach about. So yeah, it's really I've get so much out of teaching. I think that's my pathway to like ingrain it in myself. You know.
Hmm. That's one of the roles that I'm going to be transitioning into. So I have a lot of respect for it. It's also something I'm going to assume this. I don't assume that you ever thought you would be in that teaching position in a large way.
No, never, 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 never. Yeah, it was complete shock. I'm grateful that I know that. But yeah, a complete shock. Like I thought I would be working for a nonprofit. I thought I would be a therapist. Like there was all sorts of things I thought I would be, but this was not it.
It's kind of a hybrid of all those things in some ways, like the therapist and all that.
Mhm. But to me, it's a little more open, for
Yeah,
me.
therapy is kind of rigid.
Yeah, and I want to be able to do kind of weird things with people. you know?
If we can't do weird things, what are we doing here? I feel
Right. I
like.
don't want to do that's what worked for me. Yeah, I did therapy for years and it helped to a point. But then when I did all the weird stuff, I'm like, oh, breakthrough immediately, very quickly.
Yeah, therapy helps me, but it's interesting because my therapist is kind of weird. Like I did a Celtic cross tarot reading for myself last week, and then I brought it to my therapist and kind of discussed all the cards that came up. She was like, "Wow, that's really fitting for you." And like to
That's all.
remain objective about all of the cards, I just did the standard definition, which I never do. But when I try to read for myself, I put so much subjective spin on everything that I have to have a level of objectivity, and it was still incredibly powerful. It was neat, but yeah, therapy can only take you so far, and I think that that's one of the main issues that people face in our culture is they want to go to therapy to resolve all their problems, or they want to take some medication to resolve all their problems. But the reality is that at the end of the day, those things are great tools, but they're not going to actually make the substantial long-term change. It's all on the individual to actually apply all of these other outside things and become committed to their best life.
I agree completely. And I think that's where the mentorship model comes in handy because the responsibility is more on the person to do certain things. And I think some therapists work that way, but not in my experience. It's
I
very much
think
a diagnosis and talk to me every week for the rest of your life. Yeah. I got discharged once. That's pretty cool, but yeah, I tried to go back right before my son was born because of all those family issues I had. I wanted to make sure I was like set, and then I was like, this is not my path anymore. This isn't working for me anymore. So I just invested more in Reiki and things like that. Yeah.
the other really interesting thing about the mentor model, and it goes back to kind of you keep what you have by giving it away, is you actively have to be living
Yeah.
in the solution to your problems in order to be able to change it. So it holds you accountable to bettering your own life. Because I feel that you're like me, where you couldn't do this with any sense of integrity or honesty if you weren't actively living the stuff that you're telling people.
I'm sure there are some people, I don't understand how.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I'm very open. Like I'm an open book with my people. Like I know if I'm having an off day, I talk about my I have an autoimmune disease and I have like mental issues sometimes. So I'm just very open, even though I haven't had issues in a while. I have anxiety some days. I'm very open. I'm not like I am all set, but then I talk through what I did to help myself out of it. That's how we teach. We don't teach by like being this perfect person on a pedestal. Like that doesn't work. I don't want that. But
I
yeah,
agree
they also want to see
completely.
how you overcome. Like showing how you overcome is really important too. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely. Being relatable definitely requires vulnerability and exposing when things are difficult. And for me, like I can't relate to people that are healed, like they say in the new age circle. I'm healed from this. And it's like, I'm always likely going to have some issues with this. And I have better coping skills to navigate them when they come up. And some days I might not do that perfectly as well. But I also have evidence that supports the fact that I can get through this when previously I never had that evidence before. And being able to share that with people, I think gives people so much more strength than just saying, you're going to be all better forever. And it's going to be rainbows and puppy dog tails and kitten whiskers. Like,
That's super dangerous to do that. Like, I think.
that's one of my biggest issues with the new age movement and like positivity circles is it's completely unrealistic. It's like borderline psychotic philosophy, and that's bad when somebody who's been psychotic like pulls that card out.
Right. So you can say that. Yeah, I think that it's actually dangerous for healers and people that work in that. It's dangerous for you to put yourself out there as this perfect person, because then you're not allowed to fall. Like, and everyone needs a place to fall. Like, you have to. It's like life is not about just being perfect all the time. And so, yeah, and I fell in that temptation when I first started. Like, I didn't want to tell my story. Like, I didn't want to share about my addiction. I was like, what if people remember me from like my party days? And like, I was really like out there. I was like running a venue, like, so it's like, what if people just discredit me? And I was like, that has not happened once, actually that makes my story even better. So yeah, it's dangerous for people to live in that way. It's super dangerous. And, I think of even people who have leaders in the community who have even like killed themselves, because they can't live up to their own standards. And so that's just really, or what the standards I think people want to see. And so that's really, it's dangerous for all people to live in that way.
Yeah, it's an incredibly and continually narrowing path overall, living in that mindset. This is kind of another fun question.
Yeah.
What songs or bands have lyrics that most resonate with you at this moment?
Oh man. So I have a toddler, and so he's really demanding. So I have to listen to like what he wants to listen to, which thankfully, his dad's a musician. I love music. So he's listening to like M83 and Bjork right now. That's all he listens to.
I don't even know who that is.
Yeah. I'm really into like electronic stuff, a lot of stuff without words. So, and then Bjork, you know who that is.
Oh, Bjork. Yeah, I've heard of the name. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what my son listens to. And then church bells. That's all he wants to listen to. So I haven't had the chance to listen to a lot of music lately. When I go on walks, I listen to podcasts. Actually, I love podcasts. So that's really important to me. And I wish I had a better answer for you. I used to be super into music, but when you have a little one that's like completely different.
Your answer is fine.
Silly things though.
For sure. No, your answer is definitely fine. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm not like grading you or anything. It's okay. Minus 10 points. No. What philosophy, spirituality, or religions do you find most aligned with your understanding? And could you please explain them as they apply to you?
Well, it took me a while to get to this point, but I identify as a witch mostly, like, even though, and I identify with not a certain path. I identify with like the chaotic path where you kind of make your own path as you go along in life. Like, your life is completely informing your path. So when I work with clients, I work with whatever path they are living in. So I have Christian clients, I can work with that. And so I come from a Christian Catholic background, so I'm completely rebellious. Like, I don't ever want to commit to a certain path. And I guess if you were to put a label, maybe pantheist, where I see the divine in everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm completely rebellious because I wrote a lot about this, but I fell into this trap and of wanting so much to be like, to have a role, like to have, and I grew up without a father, so like Christianity was very much like helpful for me.
It's like that paternal patronage.
Yeah, I needed that paternal. But then I slowly fell into the path where it was not serving me, and I was actually kind of a slave to it, honestly. Yeah, so I'm very rebellious. I'm very like my path. I believe in our power, and I believe our connection to each other. I believe that we don't understand it all, and that I'm very open. So yeah, I'm pretty. Yeah, witchy, pantheist, chaotic. Those are the 3 labels I use.
I can dig it. I really identify with chaos magic a lot, but I also really jive with like Taoism and like Buddhism and these other philosophies. And it's kind of like this omnist approach where I like a little bit of everything, and it's like a spiritual buffet. Take what I want, leave what I don't, and I have respect for and like everybody's beliefs. I don't think that they have all the truths, and it's kind of like you said, we can't ultimately know all the truths. So it's really whatever works for other people. My basic rule of thumb is don't be a dick, and as long as people are good, that's all that really matters.
I can work with someone if you're a Christian, no problem. Like I don't have any, and I felt like the Buddhist path was for me for a while. That was when I was much younger, and then, but no, but you have to approach it with respect and not appropriating all over the place, and so you have to be careful about that. But yeah, I've been doing that for years, and I making up my own rituals however I feel like it. And I read a lot too, so things are always informing my practice. But yeah, I think that kind of serves me to work with different kinds of people too.
Yeah, it definitely makes you more flexible in the amount of people you can help if you have an open mind to others' beliefs, really, and just kind of see what fits you that day.
Yeah.
So I feel like you answer this, but maybe we can flesh it out in a more direct way. What do you perceive as your life's purpose?
Yeah, I think my life's purpose. Okay, so I used to think that I had to do something humongous, like work for a nonprofit and help a bunch of people, like in a certain way. Women's mental health was my focus. But now I really feel like my life's purpose is working with the microcosm, like working with person by person and helping them sort out their life purpose. So spiritual empowerment is really important to me in helping someone on the micro level. And I do think that every time someone works on their self, they are affecting bigger things. And so that is my life purpose.
Very eloquently put. I like it. And I feel like you answer this within that answer, but just for the sake of giving you a platform in case you want to expand upon it, what do you need to do to feel that you are working towards that goal?
I guess my thing is putting myself out there more. Like I've been pretty humble, and I think that doesn't serve like me as well as it, being humble is great, but I also have to share about my work a lot more than I do. So that's something I'm trying to work on more. And also, like you said, and I agree completely, is working on my own path, like completely investing in my own path. And something else I do is I live really cyclically. So I try to take breaks when I need to and make, if we don't have those breaks, then our work is not deep enough, I think, if you're constantly like putting yourself out there. So it's a balance, really flowing in and out of what I need to do at the time. So, yeah.
The whole cyclical thing and taking breaks is a lesson I'm learning this week, because I've pretty much had to take this whole week off from like forward progress. Doing the podcast doesn't really work for me because it's having a conversation with people, and I'm really passionate about like this element of things. It's fun for me. But I also think that, let me think of how to phrase this. There was something else that you said in there that I thought was really important, and my mind just went blank.
Yeah, I was talking about being visible, living cyclically, investing in my own work, creating depth, versus just like constantly putting things out there. I think that's a temptation. So.
Yeah, the thought left me, so whatever it is, I must not need to touch on. It must be covered as it is. This is kind of a fun question, but also probably one of the most difficult ones I'm going to ask. If you had to describe your personal philosophy or condense your life experiences into a few words, like 3 or 4 words, what would it be?
When I wrote my story about coming out of Christianity and all that, this is kind of rebellious of me, but the word I am is really important to me. I am. And so like, I am whatever I need to be and whatever, I'm connected. I am this, so just, it's kind of obscure, but that's something that helps me a lot.
So just I am is your personal philosophy?
I am. Just I am.
Okay. All right. Okay. Next question. Who inspires you?
Hmm. Yeah, I am inspired by many people, and so I'm like always learning from people. But um, actually, if I were to be, my partner inspires me a lot because he is so calm and so like in depth with his practice, but he doesn't ever like need to have this like um I don't know. I've never seen him lose his temper like ever, and I've never seen him like get shaken up by life that much. And I just think that's so impressive. And so it's something that I'm completely. I think we're very yin and yang. So it's like I'm completely different, and so I'm really inspired. Today, that's who I'm going to say. I have a ton of people that inspire me, um, teacher wise, but there's someone that's in my daily life that I kind of. And then I will say that then my clients, the people I work with, inspire me every time we have a session or something. I'm like grateful that I get to work with them, and then I'm also just inspired by. I feel better about the world. Like if I do a workshop or I work with clients, I just feel better about the world because it's easy for me to just watch the news and just be disheartened. But when I see these people who are so invested in themselves and like so invested in making the world a better place, I feel really good. And I think that so those two people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Those are really good choices. I always get giddy when people pick people that are close to them. And I almost feel like I should have this as like a recorded response for when people say it, because I always say like how I think that's a really good source of inspiration, because then it's close to home and you're never lacking and you're capable of moving forward, because people will put these lofty expectations or inspirations out there and it's not close to them, so it's not tangible. But by having tangible sources of inspiration, you're really capable of moving forward. And I almost wonder, if you look at some of the more successful people, I should say successful with air quotes,
Right.
if they have a lot of more centralized inspiration as well, if it wasn't always these lofty people. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
I think that that's why people invest in mentors, you know, to have someone in their life. But also picking a partner in your life that like inspires you is really important, you know. And yeah, having it in your face all the time. Like the support that he's giving me is just no questions ever about the support he has for me, and it's just amazing to have that kind of person in your life.
Absolutely. As somebody who's single and like looking for somebody to spend the rest of my life with, it's amazing how different the perspective of what I wanted in a partner in my 20s versus what I want in a partner in my 30s, or even versus from 32 to 34 now.
Right. Yeah.
And inspiration is a big element. Somebody who can like, who really is trying to get the most out of their life, but also knows how to have fun and like has that good balance of all the things.
Yeah, he's really goofy too, and I need that. So yeah, I not what I at all what I pictured because I never thought I'd date a musician because of the ego I thought was attached to that. But no, that's his path. That's his way of healing people, you know, is through his music. So I think that's yeah, he doesn't look anything like what I thought. I did not think I'd end up with like this guy that looks kind of like Jesus, you know. I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, it was kind of he came out of nowhere, so I'm really grateful about that. I had given up completely on dating, just completely. I was just done. I was just like, I'm gonna work on my own self, and then that's what happens, you know.
Dating's a shit show anymore.
It's horrible. I hate dating. We didn't even date. Just met at a music festival, and we were just that was it, you know.
That's what I want. Like I don't want to go through all these games. Like I never learned the
Horrible.
dating skills and I just don't want to. I don't want
I
to
have
deal with all
no
the
skills
bullshit.
whatsoever, so thankfully, neither does he. I shouldn't have said that, but he.
I can edit that out now.
Yeah.
This is our last question. What books would you suggest to others? Like what books have impacted you the most or most recently?
My if I were to have a Bible, it would be Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I suggest that males read that too. It's just such an amazing deep book. I've never read it completely, but I just read it all the time. So that's probably the biggest book.
Last week's guest suggested that book as well, so it's interesting. It's
Uh-oh.
came up twice in a week.
Someone needs to read it.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely the titles would suggest it's only for women, but it's really not. It's about the divine feminine, maybe, but the divine masculine is definitely talked about a lot in there too. See, it's pretty. I think it's like resurfacing as kind of an important book in the air too. Yeah,
I'll have to check it out.
Thick. Like, even though it's a little book, it's really like you don't want to read it all. At least me, maybe you, but
I read a lot. But that's the issue. I have such a huge reading list. Like, I'll probably be reading stuff on my reading list up until like I'm 40 or 45.
I completely relate. And then with this, my little guy, I don't read as much. I listen to a lot of things. That's why podcasts are so cool, because I can, listen to that, as I'm walking or when I'm around the house with him. He won't let me hold the book that often. So. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Rosemary. If you ever want to come back on and just kind of talk about what you're doing or whatever, you're more than welcome to. Yeah. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Do you want to take us out with a closing message to the listeners?
Well, I would say, just do your own thing, like trust yourself. And that's, even if it's the most ridiculous thing, just like trust yourself, your own path. And then trust grows as you keep trusting yourself. So. Absolutely.
And I almost forgot, I should have thrown this in earlier, but what are your links so people can check out your work or get a hold of you directly?
Yeah, so I'm at Rosemary Barria on Instagram. Is probably my favorite platform. I have a group on Facebook. It's a long title, but it's Intuitive Self-Care. You could just search that, it'll come up. Yeah, and I work with people one-on-one. I haven't really announced this too much, but I am releasing a tarot planner and workbook, and then a tarot like monthly meetup every month where we work with different archetypes and we do meditation, Reiki with that archetype every month. And so I'm going to keep that pretty accessible price-wise too. So.
Very cool. And I'll put all the links for that in the description of the video and of the podcast as well. So it's easy for everybody. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much and have a blessed day.
You too. Thank you.